I'd like to share some memories that I have with my mom. I thank David for coming, and Art and Myrna, our childhood friend David I've known since birth. Appreciate everybody coming. But I wanted to say some things that stand out in my mind to help kind of you to understand, what kind of person Mom was. No other person in the world has had more impact on my life than my mom, Ella Larson. So she told me some stories, and in all these stories, I realized that Mom went through a lot of adversity. She was really tough, and she was also a great protector of her family. I remember one time how she told me that in that picture that you saw of my grandfather and all his siblings, most of those siblings were killed by Stalin simply for the crime of being educated. And Stalin killed 14 million Russians during his purge during that time. My grandfather was arrested by the Bolsheviks, the communists, and he was put in jail with only water to drink. And he was tough. He survived for 30 days only on water, and he's like a skeleton. When he was barely strong enough to lift the pen and realized that he was going to die, he signed a blank piece of paper, which the Russians put charges on there and said he was an enemy of the people, and then put him in prison for 2 years. He was released by Stalin after a lot of complaints, and Stalin wanted to show some good faith, that the white Russians, the educated Russians, were getting a fair trial, and my grandfather specifically was defending the white Russians. And my mom told me one of the people that he defended was also Sikorsky's relative, and that's why Sikorsky later on helped him get over to this country. I remember a story that Mom told me when she was in the Nazi labor camp, and they got one meal per day for the whole family. And my grandfather, he was a lawyer. He was not a laborer. He was not a strong man. And he was going out every day from sunup to sundown working the crops in the fields. And on just one meal a day, and gradually his health declined, and he got weaker and weaker. And Mom told me she didn't know if he was going to make it. And then one day her prayers were answered. The Nazis vanished. They were gone from the labor camp. And soon after that, American soldiers came in. Well, my mom and Helen and Arcadia and Marie, they were afraid of the American soldiers. So they hid up in the barn in the hayloft for 3 days, no food, no water. And then finally they're so thirsty, my grandfather said, Ella, go out. She was about in her teenager at that time. Go out and see if the American soldiers, we can trust them. So Ella, she timidly went out for the first soldier that she could see, and the soldier saw her coming and pulled out a piece of candy. It was actually a piece of chewing gum, and held it out for her as she came. And then she took the piece of candy. The soldier had a big smile. She put it in her mouth, and then it tasted sweet, but she didn't quite know what it was. And it was actually, she didn't know this, but it was chewing gum. And she swallowed it. But then the soldier started smiling even more, and then she waved to her family come down from the barn, and the soldiers took them in, treated them with respect. They were in a refugee camp, and I think it took them about 2 years before they finally immigrated to the United States. So, and all right, and then the American soldiers, they literally, changed my mom's life, saved my grandfather's life. And my mom knew it was a debt that she could never pay back. to America, except through her children. So she really tried hard to educate her children, so, to kind of pay back her gratitude, for the soldiers saving her. She taught me what a great country this is. Her sister Helen also loved this country, became a history teacher, teaching U.S. history at Hollywood High School, just on the other side of this mountain. And Helen, she always wanted to teach, these young Americans how good this country was. My mom always stressed the importance of education. And, and I think the reason why she stressed it so much was to get back at the communists who killed all the educated people in Russia, including nearly all of her aunts and uncles. And when I was a kid, when I come home from school, I had to do my homework before I could go out and play. And on my report cards, if I got an A, I got a dime. Whoopee! And I thought I was rich, But she really stressed education. When I was applying for medical school, she didn't tell me, but she wrote a letter to the military medical school that I went to, telling them why they should accept me. And that school accepted me, and that was my first choice. And they had 3,500 applications, accepted 126 people. So I think my mom's letter had something to do with that. But going to the military medical school, that started a 26-year career for me in the U.S. Army. For 21 years, I helped Army soldiers that had helped my mom, and I helped, treat them from their combat injuries, and this was my way of trying to pay back my mom's debt of gratitude that she had for the U.S. Army and the soldiers of this country. I remember I was in the Persian Gulf during the Persian Gulf War, and I went up into Kuwait with my commander, and we had 2 army trucks full of water we were going to give the Kuwaitis, and we also had a Kuwaiti interpreter with our combat support hospital that I was with in Saudi Arabia, and we wanted to thank the Kuwaiti interpreter, who was a U.S. college student at the time the war broke out. He joined the Army to become an interpreter. So we took the interpreter and truckloads of water up into Kuwait, and we arrived in front of the interpreter's house, and the streets were completely abandoned. And we got out of our trucks looking around, and we kind of figured out what we're going to do. And we had all our combat gear on. We had M16 rifles with us, and here comes a little boy, out, wanting to find out who we're at, who we are, and whether we can be trusted or not. And remember what my mom told me about the U.S. soldier. So I pulled out a piece of candy, held it out. He came to me, picked up the candy, put it in his mouth, and turned around, waved, "Come on out." About 20 kids come running out. And I had candy for all of them. Then the parents start coming out. And, I just think of my mom, how she must have felt back when that U.S. soldier offered her that piece of chewing gum. And those are like some of the memories I have with my mom that have carried with me and made me into the person that I am. And so I spent 26 years in the Army and missed taking care of soldiers. So now I'm working at the Charlotte VA Medical Center, where all I do is take care of servicemen. Many of them have been wounded. And this is my way of, again, paying back my mom's gratitude to this country. If it hadn't been for U.S. soldiers, who knows where my mom would have been, and I certainly would not be here standing talking to you if it hadn't been for the U.S. Army and for America. So one last thing I wanted to say is probably the most important thing my mom gave me was passing on her faith to me. You know, she used to take me to church and kind of dragged me to church when I was a boy, and sometimes I didn't want to go to church, and I didn't get everything, and then she would sing in church at Bernardo Hills Baptist Church. I'm going, oh boy, you know. She sang beautifully, but it embarrassed me to have her sing. But now I think back on that, and what great memories that was, and she helped planting the roots for my faith in God. So, in parting, I just want to say, I know when I get to heaven, I'm first going to be greeted by Jesus. Right behind him will be my mom. Thank you.
Yeah. I think Ken is going to go. Are they able to do the photos, Ken?
Okay, I thank you for all coming. I see people from all over the United States travel here to pay respect. Thank you. I'd like to leave on you guys on something to think about. And it's been on my mind, you know, for at least 2 years. I spent taking care of my mom. We all get old. Nobody likes getting old. But I was an engineer, had a nice job. All of a sudden, the world just went crazy. COVID came into the world. God spread it up amongst the whole world. I was working at the time. The company closed down. People had to work from home. I mean, you saw what was going on. I mean, nursing homes where people were dying like crazy. And here my mom is getting old and now can't take care of herself. What do you do? And I know people out there have the same problem. You might have an elderly person right now that is experiencing dementia, can't take care of herself. Well, it seems like God's timing was perfect for me because as soon as the COVID hit and they told me that Ken, you can't, we don't need you anymore. I was a contractor, paid big money, everything was closing down, so I was the first to get laid off. So they said, Ken, you gotta go. So I said, well, go find a new job. But a couple weeks later, I get a phone call that my mom had fallen. She could not get up, almost died. I guess an ambulance had really found her and had to come and take her to the hospital. And she survived. Luckily, somebody got there in time, but she was laying there for who knows how long. And could have died, but God kept her alive, so doctor says she can't live alone by herself. She's got to live with somebody. So, this is my job. My mom can't take care of herself, so it was perfect time. I took her in, I started taking care of her. And really, old people don't need much care. Here I'm an engineer, people tell me what to do. I got all these deadlines to meet. Life is pretty stressful. But taking care of an old person, it's really not that hard. And yes, when they get to the point where they can't get out of bed, you gotta lift them and do all that stuff. It becomes harder. But all I was able to do was give her love and provide her food and a place to sleep. I mean, it doesn't take much. And to take care of an old person. And to go throw her in a home, everybody's throwing these old people in homes, and then COVID's coming in and they're dying like crazy. I mean, God had really blessed her in that part of her life. When she got old, she was able to come up and avoid the nursing home scandals and the nursing home things. So she spent 2 years, I was able to take care of her 2 years. Fed her, she ate like a horse, and you know, living on her own, she couldn't do this. You know, old people by themselves can't cook. That sometimes their mind starts to go. They get dementia. They can't cook. I would go home and visit her, or I'd go over to her house and visit her, and she'd be eating cookies, you know. That's all she was eating, was just stuff that you could buy at a store and not cook. And eventually it destroyed her body where she couldn't function at all. So came over to my house, I fed her well, she ate well, and she lived 2 years with me. You know, an extra 2 years. It was a blessing, but it also was a pain, because when you get old, you know, they start to go crazy and do crazy things. I have a couple pictures here I'd like to share. I know one thing my mom, that you all probably know about her, was her heart and her love and her heart that she shared with everybody. She was a very loving woman, always giving, always cared about, you know, how I can help you. And so I'd love to hear stories. If you come over to our house for the reception and have some dinner, I'd love to hear stories from everybody about the good things my mom shared in her life. I know everybody has those. She was a wonderful woman. I have a couple pictures of her in the last days, like Christmas time. She was with us, opening up gifts. And one of the things she loved to do was read the Bible. At 97 years old, she could still read the Bible. And I remember I gave her the Bible one day, and we were reading together, and she was reading a story about Jesus when they captured him and arrested him, and one of the disciples cut the ear off of one of the soldiers that was arrested. And she could not believe it. She thought that was a fake story. You know, that's what happens in the mind, you know, start getting dementia. She would always go around locking doors constantly in my house. And you know, and that, you know, it's sad to see that. And we're all going to experience that, you know, someday. So think about your elderly and maybe take them in instead of putting them in a home. There's a verse that I'd like to share with you. It's in James. You know, a lot of people are church-going people. You know, we love God. We try to be religious, you know, by going to church. And really, the Bible says that what true religion is not going to church. That's part of, you know, being a Christian, is associating with a Christian. And that's why you go to church. But you know, you got to show your love to people. And in James, it says, "Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is to visit your orphans and your widows, and in their trouble, and to keep them unspotted from the world, protect them." And that's what we should be thinking about with the old people. If you think you're a godly person, a church-going person, you need to think about these elderly people, the widows, and take care of them, because they need your help. And it helped my mom for 2 years. She would have died if, you know, 2 years ago, if somebody didn't take care of her, loving her and showing that love for the elderly. So let me see if I can get this video going. That's all I got to say is I'd love to hear your stories about some of the inspirational things she has done for you guys in your life. There's a great song that she was singing. We would watch on Sunday. We'd sit down and watch church on the internet, and they would start singing. The choirs would start singing, and she would start singing along with us. So I have a video to show you, but we'll see if we can put it on. Stand by.